Today is August 16th. It's 1600 hours. This is something I've been thinking about today. What makes good leadership? I really can't answer that. But what makes a popular leader? I can answer that. And I started thinking about this from a historical perspective. And people who led countries, people who were in a leadership role of a country, in the past, a lot of times people didn't have a choice, more or less. Particularly if you had a king and you didn't get the vote. But what made a leader popular? What makes? There's two things, and it's a very old thing. There's two things: being entertaining. And part of being entertaining, maybe it's one thing, but maybe, part one and part A of one is being a good storyteller. Okay, so if you look at some historical figures of the past, Napoleon, Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, the reason these guys, one of the reasons these men were so popular was because they had the ability to tell stories well and to entertain the people with storytelling too. So Julius Caesar would regale in the stories of his conquest, Alexander the Great, and the people that would follow these guys, they had this ability where the men would love these guys, would love them, because he made them feel a part of this guy's, of the leaders. They feel part of his story. Okay, and a good story, it's a very ancient way of communicating, is telling stories. Long before we were able to start writing things down, even drawing things on caves, we were telling stories. And a person that was a good storyteller, a person that could relay a good story, was often loved because he's entertaining. What does this have to do with today? Well, Donald Trump is kind of unique, at least in modern day presidents. He is entertaining. You can love him or you can hate him, but if you watch him, he entertains. And not just does he entertain, but he tells stories as he's going. And case in point, and part of telling a story, a really good storyteller will have the good versus evil, the hero or the heroine voices versus the villain, the protagonist and the antagonist. And these guys, a good storyteller does that. And Donald Trump does this. And how does he do that? Well, he has villains. The Democrats are the villains. Anybody that and the media are villains. And when he goes about telling a story, he points to this stuff, and these people fall for it. That's the funny thing. Trump gives nicknames to people. When you give a nickname to somebody, it sticks. You can't get away from it. It's a very old human thing, and you may hate it, and it may bother you, and you don't say it's presidential, but this is why I've lived through a lot of presidents. The very first president I can remember in my lifetime was Richard Nixon. And I don't remember watching presidents on TV too often. But I do know this. I was quick to turn a channel when they came on. And Barack Obama was no different to me. I'm quick to turn the channel when it came on. I just didn't want to hear the same cut and dry, same old song and dance I've been hearing my whole life. But Donald Trump isn't like that. So I watch all his rallies. I watch all the things I watch these things. And let's say you hate the guy. Okay, put aside your hatred. Put that off the side. If you have the ability to detach yourself from your emotions and try to look at something objectively. Watch him. Watch what he does. Now he's pretty repetitive. You know, he says pretty much the same things. I've watched him long enough. You can watch some same things over and over. But watch how he can fire up a crowd. Now, let's go with Hitler. Before Hitler became this person that everybody hated, he could rally the masses real easy. And if you watch some of his rallies, and they're on YouTube, you can watch them with subtitles. Watch how he works the crowd. He'll get up. One of the things that he did is there would be a rally planned, and there would be a time set, and everybody would get there. He would deliberately show up late. He would deliberately show up late. He'd sometimes make everybody wait for an hour. And then when he would get up there, he wouldn't say anything. He'd stand there in silence for 15 minutes. And he would build up the anticipation of what he's going to say. This was one of his things. Now, you may not like it or not, but every person in a leadership role in a country, in a political realm, they study him. I mean, you may not, it's not talked about and it's not well known, but they study him. You know, Hitler, it's funny, they don't use Mao, they don't use Pol Pot, they don't use Stalin, they don't use Lenin. Stalin's a good example because movie cameras and were around with Stalin, but they didn't film that stuff. But the Nazis filmed everything because they wanted a historical record, because they thought they were going to win the war and rule the world. So they wanted a historical record. So they documented everything. So this is why Nazis are so... That's why everybody goes for Nazis, because it's so well documented. The Marxists didn't do that. But Hitler knew how to push buttons. He knew how to work the crowd. And he would get up there and he would tell a story. And he'd be the good guy. And he had villains. Think about this. Now, at first it wasn't the Jews. At first it was the communists. What people don't realize is Hitler came to power because of the fear of communism. Not over the fear of Jews. That came later. But the Bolshevik Revolution happened at the end of World War I. And that was on the eastern border of Germany. They were terrified. The world was terrified what happened in Russia when the Bolshevik Revolution took place. Modern people don't think about this. You're 70-something years removed from it. Right? But if you don't know history, you don't have an understanding of what motivates people. Hitler came to power out of fear of the communists that were on their eastern border. That is how he was able to seize power. Now, he was able to galvanize the people. There were other things involved, the economy, the repression of the German people under a war debt that they didn't think they deserved. There's a lot of reasons. But what it came down to is Hitler had the ability to entertain. Okay? But he wasn't entertaining in a whimsical way. I find Trump to be entertaining in a very common way. And what he does is I think he appeals to blue-collar workers because he has the ability to connect with blue-collars. Look, his vocabulary isn't through the roof. I mean, I have a better vocabulary than him. But I'm going to tell you, I probably do not have his his skill. I definitely don't have his skills for business. Come on, I don't. So a person's vocabulary doesn't necessarily mean I could easily pass myself off as a scientist. I actually have had people say that to me, people that I have met before, because I could probably do it pretty well. But the point is, and Napoleon was good at this too. Alexander the Great was good at it. Alexander the Great could sit down with his men, and the men loved him. He would tell his stories, and if you look at any of the old ancient stories, whether it be Homer, Gilgamesh, ancient people loved this. But there's something that appeals to all human beings about storytelling. So if you are going to be a president, and this is what I'm basically trying to say this, Donald Trump has forever changed how you can win the presidency. It is in some way a cult of personality. He can get up there and entertain. And he got right off the bat in the debates. People would tune in. He's not presidential. He's not behaving the way we expect somebody of his position to be behaving. Well, that's why people voted for him. It's really that simple. That is why people voted for him, because he was completely different. And I love to watch him. I particularly love to listen to him bash China. I've been bashing China since NAFTA was signed. And I love hearing him hammer that home. China's the villain. China has been a villain for a long time. So the news media is the villain. The fake news is the villain. China's the villain. Iran's the villain. North Korea, you don't know what's going on with that yet. There's, so there's storytelling involved in the things that he does. No president has done that. They usually get up there and they're dry and they're boring, but not Trump. So he had a rally in New Hampshire, and there was a protester there. You don't know what the protester said or what he did. All I know is Trump said, "Hey, you got a weight problem." I'm sorry. That is funny to me. I don't care if it's insensitive, because anybody listen to this knows damn well that you see, well, come on. You haven't watched My 600-Pound Life and sat there and rolled your eyes? I mean, seriously, you haven't done that? I mean, you may not publicly have the guts to go out and say, "Geez, that guy is fat." Okay. You may not publicly have the guts to do that, but you're thinking it, and that's all that matters. Trump not just thinks it, but he says it. So I love that stuff. I don't care. I don't want him to be presidential. I want him to be Donald Trump. You do what we elected you to do. Get out there, be a bulldog with these other countries and trade deals, and that's part of the storytelling. Do you ever remember a president coming out talking about trade deals? Do you remember? I don't ever remember a president talking about what happened to our steel industry. I don't ever remember a president really hitting hard with NAFTA. God, that's a hot button for me, because I watched NAFTA. I've said this before. I watched NAFTA destroy an industry I was in for 30 years. And I wasn't the only person. I wasn't the only industry, only person. And there were other industries. People know it. So China's the villain. So a good storyteller has good versus evil, villains, and stories of heroic deeds. So what does Trump go up there? He sits there, "We've done this, we've done that. There's heroic deeds involved." He's a good storyteller. And I'm not talking about making up stories and making up lies. But if you could tell stories, if you're really good at telling, look, people that told stories historically were revered in ancient cultures, were revered. So if you had a leader that had that ability, the people would become endeared to them, and it would make them feel like they're part of the story. So Trump gets up there and he makes you feel like you're part of the story. So why do people want to get into those rallies? Because they're fun. Because they're fun. Look, I'm not. If Dick Durbin, the senator from Illinois, had a rally, why would I go see that guy? He is so pathetically boring. How many politicians would you really want to go and see? How pathetic and boring are they all? They're all boring. And they're also, and he's right, Trump is right about that, they're also politically correct. You know they're not going to say something that's going to make you raise your eyebrow. I want to hear stuff that's going to make me raise my eyebrow. So you know darn well, and I haven't checked the news feed today, that Trump probably pissed off a boatload of people by saying, calling this guy overweight. You know he did. And so he stirs up controversy every time he sends out a tweet, every time he opens his mouth. But at the heart of all of this, he is a good storyteller. And he entertains when he tells these stories. That doesn't mean he doesn't. Some people are going to say, he's doing a terrible job. You have the right to feel like that. But history is an interesting thing. Abraham Lincoln is now viewed as one of the greatest presidents we ever had. But at the time, God, he was hated. I mean, he was assassinated, for crying out loud. He was assassinated. Think about this. He was hated. And history has a way of judging presidents more than the time that they live in judge them. So history will judge Donald Trump more than anything else. And only time will tell. Because I think it'll be interesting to see what happens if he loses the election, which I don't think is going to happen. And in consequent elections, when particularly if we have a really strong economy for a while, and let's see what happens when Democrats come in, and if it crashes, then Trump is always going to be the model that they're going to look for. And I'm telling you right now, there are people, historians and otherwise, that are studying him, okay, to see why he is so successful with people. And I think this is part of the problem. Too many people have forgotten what it means to be human. Political correctness is not being human. I'm sorry, it isn't. It's a false narrative. It's being fake. It's bullshit. So what happens is when you end up with a culture full of bullshit, when the first it's like the whole what's the story? Oh, what's that fairy tale? I forgot it. But it's the person that tells the truth. Oh, the emperor has no clothes. If you remember that story from childhood, it's the emperor walks around the street naked, and everybody's too afraid to say he's naked. He thinks he's crazy. He thinks he's wearing these beautiful new clothing, and everybody is just telling him, oh, it's beautiful, it's wonderful. He gets out in the street in a parade, he's paraded naked, and a little boy says, the emperor has no clothes. And everybody's horrified that he says that. Okay, so this is the culture that we're living in. So when the little boy speaks the truth, calls everybody else out for just playing by the rules, the little boy is going to be the one that gets in trouble. So keep that in mind. Remember, good leadership, and part of being good leadership is being entertaining and being good at telling a story. Now, I don't know how that's going to work, whether it's leadership in a household, leadership in business. That's a whole other thing. But I'm talking about when it comes to leadership in a political realm, and you're trying to gain the popularity of you're trying to gain the trust of the people. That is key. Part of it is to be entertaining. And Trump is entertaining. And whether you like it or not, like I said, study Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great, Napoleon, even Genghis Khan, as brutal as he was. And you have to look at Hitler too. Because these guys all had the ability to entertain and to tell stories. And that is one of the secrets to leadership. I guess we'll see how this works with the election coming up in 2020. Because as sooner, you would think that any of these other politicians would figure that out, but they haven't. They're too damn dumb. They're too damn dumb. They will never figure it out. They are too worried about being politically correct and not want to offend the snowflakes that will vote for them. And that's really what it comes down to. Till next time.